The scent of freshly brewed coffee and warm cinnamon rolls usually filled the daily grind with a comforting embrace, but this morning a prickle of unease tightened Harper's chest. It was the first time in well over a year she had been late, and the usually bustling cafe felt eerily silent to her hurried steps. She tugged her crisp white apron over her emerald green blouse, her fingers fumbling with the ties. A quick pat to her slightly askew ponytail, and she emerged into the cosy dining area, hoping her 20-minute tardiness would slip unnoticed. No such luck. "Harper, a word?" The clear, resonant voice of the cafe's owner, Mrs. Albright, floated down from the winding staircase that led to her upstairs office. "As soon as you're done with that table, please come see me." Harper moved with deliberate slowness, setting down a fragrant herbal tea and a plate of blueberry scones before her guests. With a soft sigh, she turned towards Mrs. Albright's office. Victoria Albright was a woman of firm principles, yet her fairness was undeniable. She had often overlooked small missteps from her staff, but tardiness was an absolute no-go. It took an incredibly compelling reason to excuse such a lapse, and Harper thankfully had one. Without a second thought, she pushed open the office door, offering a sheepish smile. "Well, overslept, did we?" Mrs. Albright queried, peering over the rim of her delicate eyeglasses. "Or perhaps missed your usual commuter train? Come on, don't just stand there. That chair isn't merely for decoration." Harper sank reluctantly into the plush velvet chair, her trembling fingers nervously pleating the crisp linen of her apron. "Neither, actually," she murmured, gathering her courage. Well, I'm pregnant." Mrs. Albright's pen clattered onto her mahogany desk, her eyes widening in astonishment. For a moment it seemed as though every worry line of her face had magically smoothed away. "Is that so?" "Truly?" "Yes. This morning. I felt a bit queasy, even thought about calling in sick, but then I decided, why not take a test? And I still can't quite believe it." "Why didn't you call then?" Mrs. Albright asked, a note of surprised wonder in her voice. "I don't know," Harper confessed, shrugging her shoulders. "Perhaps I just wanted to share the joy with everyone." Mrs. Albright poured them both a soothing cup of mint tea, then perched on the edge of her desk. "Share the joy," she mused, a faint smile touching her lips. "And what? You're going to run through the cafe shouting your news to every patron?" "Oh, why everyone?" Harper's cheeks flushed. "You, for example, already know. The other girls would find out when the time was right. Is it really so wrong to share happiness?" She fell silent, her gaze fixed on Mrs. Albright, whose expression had grown thoughtful, tinged with a quiet melancholy, as if she had unearthed a tender forgotten memory. "Happiness," she repeated softly, tracing the rim of her teacup. "Yes, I suppose it is a happiness to be a mother. A joy that regrettably passed me by." "And the father?" "It's Ben," Harper answered immediately. "Benjamin Hamilton. You might remember him. He used to stop by the cafe quite often." "Of course I remember," Mrs. Albright affirmed. "I never would have guessed things were so serious between you two. His father, you know, owns Hamilton Developments, a rather prominent figure." Harper frowned, recognizing the familiar, subtle judgment. "What does that have to do with anything?" she retorted, a flash of defiance in her eyes. "We love each other, and everything else simply isn't important." "But he hasn't proposed marriage, has he?" "Not yet," Harper couldn't seem to stop fidgeting with her apron. "Please excuse me, but I really should get back to work. And about being late, I promise it won't happen again, honestly." She rose, ready to leave, but Mrs. Albright's steady gaze held her in place. "Wait," she said, a gentle smile appearing. "Listen, I know you'll think I'm meddling, but please understand, I care about what happens to you. You're a wonderful employee, a truly good person, and I value that. You yourself said you don't have family to lean on, no one to offer you guidance. The Hamiltons are complex people. Like many with great wealth, they often think only of themselves. You're not his equal, dear Harper. He has a history of fleeting interests, and you're like a treasured keepsake. He might admire it for a time, then set it aside, leaving you with nothing but heartache." "Honestly, I really think this is my business," Harper said, a hint of hurt in her voice. "I really should go." "Go on then," Mrs. Albright nodded, "and forgive me if I've offended you." Harper turned on her heel in silence, pulling the door a bit too firmly shut behind her. The airy, hopeful mood with which Harper had entered the office had vanished, leaving a hollow ache. "Ah, my dear child," Mrs. Albright sighed after she'd gone. It was already dusk when Harper glanced out her apartment window and saw Ben's sleek charcoal sedan parked near the curb. With a joyful squeal, she drew the curtains, then practically bounced onto the sofa. It was already dusk when Harper glanced out her apartment window and saw Ben's sleek SUV parked near the curb. With a joyful squeal, she drew the curtains, then practically bounced onto the sofa. A torrent of emotions surged within her, so potent she couldn't sit still for a second. She smoothed the elegant lace tablecloth on her dining table, added 2 more tall, slender candles, and checked if the sparkling wine was perfectly chilled. Finally, a soft, tentative knock echoed at the door, pulling Harper from her nervous anticipation. She practically flew across the small living room, her heart a wild drum against her ribs. The moment the door swung open, revealing Ben, her carefully constructed world felt poised on the precipice of something extraordinary. "What's the special occasion?" Ben asked, stepping inside, his eyes widening slightly at the sight of cheerful, pearl-white balloons bobbing near the ceiling and the delicate twinkle of fairy lights strung across the mantelpiece. A hint of amusement played on his lips, a look she usually adored. "It's a surprise," Harper replied, her voice a little breathless with excitement, as she carefully retrieved a chilled bottle of sparkling wine from a bucket overflowing with ice. She'd chosen the non-alcoholic option, a small secret nod to the momentous news she was about to share. Ben, still waiting for a clearer explanation, uncorked the bottle with a satisfying pop and poured the effervescent liquid into 2 elegant crystal flutes. His gaze then shifted to Harper, who was carefully filling a 3rd glass, a delicate vintage tumbler with cranberry juice. "Why aren't you drinking?" he inquired, a brow arching. "Are you planning to poison me with all this mystery?" She choked on her own suppressed laughter, waving her hands in protest. "Oh, your jokes are truly awful sometimes," she grumbled playfully, clearing her throat. The laughter, however, quickly faded into a profound seriousness. "And I'm not drinking the wine because, well, the baby wouldn't like it." Ben's hands, still holding the flute, paused mid-air. "What baby?" he asked, his voice suddenly devoid of its earlier lightness, utterly bewildered. "A regular one," Harper said, her voice softening, filled with an almost unbearable tenderness. A tiny little thing. It's brand new. Just arrived. She floated across the room to her dresser and carefully pulled a small, slender stick, no bigger than her index finger, from a velvet-lined drawer. It's a test. I took it this morning, she explained, her voice trembling slightly with the weight of the revelation. See? 2 lines. It means I'm pregnant, Ben. Ben froze. The crystal flute still suspended in his hand, not quite reaching his lips. Harper watched him, a wave of pure, unadulterated joy washing over her. She misinterpreted his utter stillness, believing it was born of an overwhelming, speechless happiness at the life-altering news she had just delivered. She imagined him wrapping her in his arms, tears of joy in his eyes, whispering promises of a shared future. Instead, a chilling silence descended, thick and suffocating, pressing in on her hopeful anticipation. Finally, Ben's voice, startlingly devoid of warmth, pierced the quiet. Are you sure it's my baby? Harper stared at him, her smile faltering, then crumbling entirely. Whose else would it be? She retorted, her brow furrowed in a confusion that quickly morphed into disbelief. Are you actually suggesting that I... The accusation hung in the air, a venomous, unseen serpent. She wanted to unleash her hurt, to demand an explanation for such a cruel insinuation. But at that devastating moment, Ben gripped the fragile glass flute so tightly it splintered in his hand. The sharp crack echoed in the suddenly small room, and a dark ruby bead of blood welled up from his palm, mingling with the sparkling wine. Let's say it's mine, he said slowly, his voice flat, devoid of any emotion, as he scattered the broken shards onto the pristine white tablecloth. He then reached into his pocket and roughly wrapped a handkerchief around his bleeding hand. All right, I'll give you some money, but you'll have to handle everything yourself. Harper's mind reeled. Money? Handle what myself? She stammered, her hand instinctively reaching out, grabbing his arm, turning him forcefully to face her. For going to the clinic, Ben immediately replied, his eyes cold and distant. You're not actually planning on keeping it, are you? Harper's hand, still gripping his arm, went numb, then fell away. The joy, the hope, the dreams she had woven around this tiny life shattered around her like fragile glass. What are you saying? What about us? Ben pulled his injured hand from his pocket, a grim, humourless smile twisting his lips. What us? He scoffed, his voice laced with disdain. Are you completely out of your mind? Why would you want that kind of burden? Personally, I don't need any of this. Do you even realise what it takes? The sheer effort to raise a child? But I thought we'd do it together, Harper whispered, her eyes fixed on the dancing, wavering flame of the tall, twisted candle on the table, which now blurred and distorted through her sudden tears. Her voice was thin, like a wisp of smoke, as if speaking from a dream. I thought we'd have a family. We've been together for so long, Ben. We've been together for a little over 6 months, Ben exclaimed, his voice rising, edged with impatience. Look, we're dating. That's all. What's the big deal? Everyone does it. Have you just conjured up some wild, unrealistic fantasy in your head? Honestly, it's like a kindergarten crush. So, my love, all of this, is just a kindergarten crush to you? Harper asked, her voice still achingly colourless, barely a whisper. She wasn't truly asking for confirmation, she was simply stating the painful, undeniable truth. And I'm not wanted either. Don't be so dramatic, Harper, Ben scowled, zipping up his jacket with a harsh rasp. And let's skip the theatrical scenes, all right? We can talk tomorrow when we've both had a chance to think clearly. Do you actually need anything from me right now? Harper continued to stare at the thick, elegant candle, watching its flame steadily consume the wax, creating slow, glistening rivulets down its side. The dreams she had cherished, the future she had envisioned, were melting away, just like the candle. No, she finally managed to reply, the single word brittle and hollow. Ben leaned in, delivered a quick, dismissive peck on her forehead and walked out, leaving behind the heavy scent of his expensive cologne and the stark crimson stains on her white tablecloth, an ugly testament to the brutal reality that had just unfolded. For a long, agonizing moment, Harper stood rooted to the spot, her gaze transfixed by the dark bloodstains. Then a primal scream tore from her throat, raw and anguished, echoing in the now silent apartment. She lunged forward, her hands sweeping across the table, overturning it with a crash that sent crystal and china shattering into 1,000 pieces. She cried, then wailed, then simply lay curled on the cold floor amidst the debris, sobbing until the first pale light of dawn crept through the windows. Exhaustion finally claimed her, pulling her into a heavy, dreamless sleep as soon as she stumbled into bed. She woke much later in the evening when the street lights outside began to cast their familiar amber glow. Her mind felt strangely empty, a peculiar, disquieting blankness. Not fully aware of what she was doing, Harper pulled on a worn jacket and walked out of her apartment building, wandering aimlessly down the street, oblivious to the cold, persistent drizzle that had begun to fall. She walked past the Daily Grind, the cosy cafe that had, just hours ago, represented her entire stable world. She didn't pause, didn't even glance inside. Instead, she turned down a narrow, shadowy alley and found herself in a small, rather disreputable liquor store, its neon sign flickering erratically. Without a moment's hesitation, she asked for a box of cheap red wine. The moment it was in her hands, she tore it open and took a long, burning gulp. Just yesterday, the mere thought of alcohol, especially with a life blooming inside her, would have been abhorrent. Today, she didn't consider the future baby, didn't think of herself at all. Her head felt unnervingly clear, as if someone had, in an instant, wiped all thoughts, all feelings from her mind. Everything she had lived for in the past few months had suddenly evaporated, dissolved like the candle wax that had burned so brightly on her celebratory table. Harper left the store and headed towards the old stone bridge that connected the bustling town to the quiet, almost forgotten suburban settlement where she had grown up. It was the site of the children's home, a place she hadn't visited since she'd left its doors, a teenager stepping into an uncertain future. Twilight hadn't yet deepened into true, impenetrable darkness when Harper reached the bridge. Long ago, when she was just a small girl, she and her friends from the orphanage would often sneak out to this very bridge. They'd spend hours here, tossing pebbles into the narrow, winding river below, watching the ripples expand. Sometimes they'd simply sit on the rough stone railings, their legs dangling, observing the slow, silent glide of old fishing boats. Harper remembered one afternoon vividly. Little Charlie, a boy her age, with fearless eyes, had dared to walk the entire length of the bridge on the narrow parapet, mimicking a tightrope walker in a circus. He had slipped, falling silently into the churning water, hitting his head on a jagged support beam below. He was gone in an instant. After that harrowing day, the children from the orphanage never ventured onto the old bridge again. For Harper, every time she found herself on its weathered planks, she couldn't help but recall little Charlie, the sweet, mischievous boy who never lived to see his 11th birthday. Pausing at the entrance to the bridge, Harper took another defiant swig of the cheap wine, the bitter liquid burning her throat, and then quickened her pace. The soles of her boots echoed on the cold metallic surface, and the pungent smell of stagnant water and decaying fish wafted up from the considerably dwindled river below. Pulling her scarf tighter to cover her face, Harper reached the middle of the bridge and, with a terrifying resolve, climbed over the rusty railing. Once on the narrow, precarious ledge, she instinctively gasped, her breath catching in her throat as she peered down. The churning water was a dizzying 60 feet below, a dark, hungry maw. She drained the last drops of wine, then hurled the empty box into the abyss. It spiraled down slowly, a pale rectangle against the inky blackness, before finally landing on the murky surface, drifting silently away into the shadows. Taking a deep, shuddering breath, Harper leaned forward, teetering on the very edge, her arms outstretched, as if preparing to embrace the vast emptiness. Another fleeting second, and then, "Hey, what are you doing?" a thin, reedy voice suddenly piped up from behind her. "Are you going to jump? I wouldn't recommend it. My friend, Timmy, tried to jump from here once and he almost broke his neck. And Timmy's really athletic. He can do all sorts of things." Harper jolted, spinning around to face the unexpected interruption. In her shock, her footing slipped on the slick, narrow ledge. Her heart leaped into her throat as she plunged downwards, instinctively flailing for something, anything, to grasp. Her fingers closed around a thin, rusty rebar jutting out from the bridge's side. She tried to pull herself up to regain her footing, but her arms felt impossibly weak, trembling under her weight. "Hold on!" a small voice squeaked, and a tiny girl, impossibly brave, scrambled through the railing. "I'll be right there! Just a second!" The girl lay flat on her stomach, hooking her legs around a sturdy part of the railing, and with surprising strength began to pull Harper upwards, grunting and straining with effort. Despite her small stature and slender build, the child was astonishingly strong. She managed to haul Harper almost to her waist, allowing Harper to scramble the rest of the way onto the ledge herself. Only then did the girl release her grip, her small fingers white and stiff. "Thank you," Harper whispered, her voice hoarse, still reeling from the terrifying brush with oblivion. She looked at her small saviour, a blur of motion, as the girl dusted off her jacket. "What's your name?" "Myra," the girl replied, her eyes wide and curious. "And what are you doing out here so late? Why aren't you home?" "I don't have a home," Myra shrugged, a poignant, mature acceptance in her tone. "I live in the orphanage over there across the river." She helped Harper climb back over the railing, then blew on her own chilled hands. The night promised to be bitterly cold. The strong wind had swept away the rain clouds, leaving the sky a vast canvas sparkling with brilliant stars. "And how long have you been there?" Harper asked, her voice gentle, as she instinctively extended her own gloves to the girl. "What happened to your parents?" "Almost a year now," Myra sighed, a deep, heavy sound for such a small person. My mum was hit by a car, and honestly, I really don't like it there." Harper carefully pulled the soft gloves onto Myra's numb fingers, then began leading her back the way she had come. "I understand," she nodded, glancing back at the darkening strip of woods beyond the bridge, knowing the orphanage lay on the other side. "I grew up there myself, lived there until I was 18. I always thought someone would come for me, but they never did." A sudden comforting thought blossomed in Harper's mind. "Come on, let's go grab something to eat. How does that sound?" "Great!" Myra's eyes lit up and she nodded enthusiastically. "I'm really hungry." Harper took the girl's small hand in hers, a wave of profound gratitude washing over her. She couldn't help but wonder what might have happened tonight, if not for this remarkable child. After treating Myra to a warm, delicious meal at the Daily Grind, Harper stood on the cafe's porch, chatting with her new acquaintance as they waited for a taxi. Suddenly, a car emerged from a side street on the opposite side of the road, its headlights blazing, momentarily blinding them. Harper shielded her eyes with her hand, and when she lowered it, she found Ben standing directly in front of them, his figure silhouetted against the car's bright beams. "I finally found you," he exclaimed, striding closer, a strained relief on his face. "You weren't home, your phone wasn't answering, and work said you had the day off. I decided to try checking here again, and here you are." "What do you want?" Harper snapped, her voice sharp, hardened by the night's despair. "Oh, nothing much," he said, forcing a nonchalant smile. "Just wanted to talk, remember? We agreed to talk yesterday." "We didn't agree on anything, Ben," Harper retorted, her voice a low growl. "How dare you even show your face here?" Ben shoved his hands into his pockets, rocking slightly on the balls of his feet, clearly strategizing his next move. If it hadn't been for the shroud of darkness, Harper would have seen the malicious smirk distorting his features. Finally, he pulled a cigarette from his pocket and lit it, the cherry glowing ominously in the dim light. "Come on, Harper." Ben exhaled a stream of smoke, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "I understand yesterday was a tough conversation, and we just had a slight disagreement. These things happen, but you have to understand my side too. This situation affects me as well. Your baby is my baby." As he spoke, Ben kept his gaze fixed solely on Harper, completely oblivious to Myra, who was quietly sitting on a nearby bench. Not understanding the adult argument, the little girl soon lost interest in their heated exchange and gravitated towards Ben's expensive car, drawn by its sleek lines, eager to get a closer look. "It's him!" Myra suddenly shrieked, her voice cutting through the night air like a knife. She stumbled forward, pointing a trembling finger at Ben. "It's him! He's the one!" Tears streamed from her eyes, and her small body began to shake with an uncontrollable, furious tremor. Harper dropped to her knees, pulling the distraught child into a tight embrace, trying to soothe her while urgently seeking an explanation. "It's him! He did it!" Myra repeated, glancing wildly back at Ben. "He killed my mummy!" Ben choked on his cigarette smoke, coughing violently as he threw the butt to the ground. "What nonsense is this?" he blustered, his voice loud and defensive. "Who is this kid anyway?" Myra, wrestling to control her overwhelming emotions, straightened to her full, tiny height and balled her small hands into fists. She lifted her tear-streaked face, her eyes blazing with a defiant courage, and glared at him. "You hit my mum that day," she declared, pressing her back against Harper's legs for support. "She was crossing the street. She tripped and you didn't even stop. I remember your car clearly. It haunted my dreams for so long." Myra, unable to hold back the torrent of grief and fear any longer, burst into fresh tears, her small body racked with sobs. "This is nonsense," Ben mumbled, backing towards his car, his face a mask of denial. "I didn't hit anyone." He fumbled for the car door handle. "Look, Harper, we'll talk another time. I really need to go." "Stop right there," Harper roared, her voice surprisingly strong, pulling out her phone. "I don't know if you hit someone or not, but competent people will figure that out. I'm calling the police." Ben ripped open his car door, but before he could leap inside, Myra launched herself at him, her small hands clamping onto his leg with surprising strength. He tried to shake her off, but her grip was like iron. Enraged, he raised his hand, intending to strike her. Myra, quick as a flash, dodged the blow. Ben's fist sliced through the cold night air, a sickening whoosh of displaced emptiness. "You little pest!" he snarled, grabbing the child's hair, his face contorted with fury. "Get off me, you brat!" Myra's pitiful cry ignited a spark of desperate courage in Harper. She surged forward, a whirlwind of protective instinct, striking Ben with wild, uncoordinated blows. The unexpected commotion pierced the cosy warmth of the daily grind. In an instant, the cafe's kind-hearted waitress Sarah and the burly assistant chef Matt emerged onto the porch. Seeing Harper engaged in an uneven struggle, Matt rushed to her aid, landing a solid punch to Ben's ear. The blow only seemed to infuriate Ben further. He shoved the two women away with a violent shove, then turned his full, terrifying attention to Matt. Uttering a string of vile curses, he delivered a brutal kick to Matt's groin. As Matt doubled over from the agonizing impact, Ben smoothly pulled a folding knife from his pocket. The chilling click of the blade echoed in the night. The short, glinting steel shimmered menacingly in the hazy glow of the street lamp. "You piece of trash!" Ben hissed triumphantly, his eyes gleaming with a twisted satisfaction, and slashed the knife across Matt's leg. "Who do you think you're messing with, you worm?" Matt, still reeling from the initial kick, crumpled to the asphalt, clutching his bleeding leg. Stunned by such brutal cruelty, the women dared not interfere further, watching in horrified silence as Ben's car sped away, its taillights vanishing into the darkness. Their stunned paralysis was shattered by a new piercing scream. "What are you standing around for?" Mrs. Albright's voice, sharp with urgency, cut through the night as she rushed towards the injured Matt. "Come on, help him! Get him inside, now!" "But what about Ben?" Harper stammered, receiving a firm, impatient shove to her shoulder from her boss. "He ran away." "Good riddance," Mrs. Albright retorted, her voice filled with frustrated exasperation. "Let him run. They'll catch him eventually. You, Harper, grab his legs, and Sarah, support his head." They carefully carried Matt into the cafe and gently laid him on a sturdy dining table. Mrs. Albright, her gaze surprisingly steady, meticulously examined the wound. She instructed Sarah to fetch water and hydrogen peroxide. "It's all right, thank goodness," she stated, her voice softening as she gently stroked Matt's hair. "Another inch and it would have been catastrophic. As it is, it doesn't look too serious. He'll have a respectable scar, of course, but that's nothing to fret over. Scars always suit a man." When Sarah returned with water and a first aid kit, Mrs. Albright carefully cleaned the wound and bandaged Matt's face. Then she told Harper to call an ambulance, but Matt, despite his pain, shook his head. "Are you okay, Harper?" he asked, trying to sit up, clutching his stomach. "He didn't hurt you badly?" Harper grasped his trembling hand and offered a weak, grateful smile. "No, he didn't even touch me," she replied, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you, Matt." "All right, everyone," Mrs. Albright declared, looking at Harper, Sarah and the now bandaged Matt. "We're going straight to the police station. This kind of savagery cannot go unpunished. Sarah, can you pull up the security camera footage from outside? I'm sure our cameras caught everything." With Matt carefully supported and the crucial footage secured, the group made their way to the precinct. The officers listened intently to their harrowing account, Myra's trembling testimony providing a powerful first-hand narrative, corroborated by Harper's shaken words and the clear images from the cafe's surveillance system. Only after that did they return to the relative peace of the daily grind. The cafe, though still bearing the evidence of chaos with the overturned table and broken glass, now felt like a sanctuary. Harper, Myra and Mrs. Albright settled into a quiet corner of the cafe, the exhaustion of the night finally catching up to them. Mrs. Albright poured steaming cups of coffee, the rich aroma doing little to soothe the tension, but offering a small comfort. "I warned you, you silly girl. That Ben, he's a bad seed, just like his father. So, have you had enough of playing at love now?" "How did you know all this?" Harper asked, her voice hushed, her eyes wide with newfound understanding. "I had the misfortune of getting involved with his father once upon a time." Mrs. Albright took a slow sip of her coffee, then leaned back in her armchair, her gaze fixed on some distant unseen spot. "We had what you might call a romance. You know, a sordid little affair that ended badly. I was young then, so naive, and I got burned just like you." "What do you mean?" Harper pressed, gently settling the still frightened Myra onto her lap, stroking her hair. "Well, when I was around 20, I met Arthur, Ben's father," Mrs. Albright began, her voice soft, contemplative, as if narrating a story from a faded photograph. "He was 5 years older than me, and already wealthy thanks to his parents, who'd made their fortune in imported goods. I truly believed we were serious, that he loved me. Ha! What a fool I was. He loved his expensive Italian shoes far more than he ever loved me. But that, of course, became clear much later. Why would he need a simple girl like me, even if I was pretty enough? Then his parents found him a suitable match, some minor actress or a fashion model, and he simply cast me aside, just like that, in a single day." Mrs. Albright paused, her gaze drifting to the window, lost in the shadows of the past. "And I was already 5 months pregnant." "And what happened to your child?" Harper asked, her voice barely a whisper, as Mrs. Albright took a moment's pause. You didn't actually—" "No, I didn't do anything," Mrs. Albright interrupted, a bitter, humourless smile twisting her lips. "I couldn't bring myself to. I showed up at Arthur's family home, told him I was going to have his child, and when that child grew up, I would tell them what a complete scoundrel their father was." A flicker of raw pain crossed Mrs. Albright's face. "Arthur was furious. He lunged at me, his fists flying, and beat me badly. It ended in a miscarriage." Tears streamed down Mrs. Albright's wrinkled cheeks, and Harper's heart ached. This woman, who had done so much for her, now sat before her broken, and Harper didn't know how to comfort her. How could anyone truly console a mother who had lost her child? Were there even words for such a profound grief? "My father, when he found out I was in the hospital, wanted to kill Arthur," Mrs. Albright sighed, dabbing her eyes with a dampened handkerchief. "I stopped him. It took everything I had. I didn't want him to carry that sin." "But he would have done it, Harper. He would have killed him, I know it. He'd already served 7 years for another incident, and he would have done it again, for me and for his grandchild." She shook her head, A deep, weary sadness etched on her face. But it all worked out, in a way. Arthur's father paid us a substantial sum, promising they'd never bother us again if I didn't press charges and ruin his son's life. I didn't. But now, she looked towards Myra, her gaze heavy with regret. Now I regret not doing it. It's all happened again. Who will give this little girl her mother back? She looked at the quiet, bewildered child and began to weep anew. Harper, her own eyes moist, refilled Mrs. Albright's coffee cup and gently draped her own coat over her shoulders. Touched by such simple kindness, Mrs. Albright pulled Harper into a tight embrace. "Listen," she whispered, her voice fierce. "We have to make that scoundrel pay for what he's done. And the girl?" Mrs. Albright's gaze softened as she looked at Myra, a flicker of something long dormant igniting in her eyes. "I'll take her in. I've always dreamt of having a daughter." A hopeful, uncertain note entered her voice. "Do you think I'd be a good mother at my age?" "You would be a wonderful mother," Harper affirmed, her voice filled with conviction. "I don't know, Harper. Am I too old for such a role?" Mrs. Albright questioned, a flicker of doubt crossing her face. Myra, observing the two whispering, tearful adults, fidgeted impatiently in her chair. "I'll be a good girl," she piped up, her small voice earnest, clearly understanding the essence of their conversation. "I always listened to my mummy. Just please take me from the orphanage, and I promise I won't let you down." She looked at them with such raw, heartfelt pleading that both women's hearts melted. "Oh, my little bird," Mrs. Albright murmured, reaching out her arms to the child. "Come here, my sweet blossom." She embraced Myra as tightly as she possibly could. In that very moment, a distant memory resurfaced. She was transported back to that faraway time when she was young and carried an unborn child beneath her heart. But now, thanks to this strange, even terrifying night, Victoria Albright, a woman well into her 50s, felt like a mother once more. Several months later, a different kind of warmth filled the daily grind, replacing the usual morning bustle with the soft glow of fairy lights and the scent of pine. It was New Year's Eve and the cafe was closed to the public, transformed for a private celebration. "All right, everyone, may I have your attention for just a moment?" Mrs. Albright announced, tapping a teaspoon against a crystal champagne flute. Her voice, usually so commanding, held a newfound tenderness. "I won't keep you long. I know it's almost midnight, and you're all eager to drink and celebrate. But you'll have to indulge me. After all, I am your boss." She surveyed her hushed employees, who stood with glasses of champagne and sparkling wine in hand, and a contented smile spread across her face. "As you know, this past year has been quite something," Mrs. Albright continued, a mischievous twinkle in her eye, as she looked directly at Harper and Myra, who sat together, Myra nestled comfortably beside Harper. "There's been sorrow, yes, but also profound joy. Someone here nearly lost a leg and gained a rather impressive scar in a battle with a villain who thankfully has been brought to justice. And someone else, in her golden years, gained a child." Her gaze swept over Harper. "And someone else still has that beautiful happiness to look forward to." She raised her glass, her eyes glistening. "So, my dears, I propose a toast to continuing to share all our joys and sorrows, triumphs and challenges as one big loving family. To our family, to the daily grind, and to a very happy new year." "Cheers!" everyone echoed, raising their glasses, a chorus of genuine warmth filling the room. Everyone exchanged happy glances, and it was only then that Harper noticed Matt's intense, meaningful gaze fixed on her. She clinked her glass against his once more, and he leaned in, his voice a low rumble. "Any plans for New Year's Eve after this?" Harper took a sip of her sparkling wine, a mysterious smile playing on her lips. "I don't know yet," she replied, her heart fluttering. "Do you have any ideas?" Matt's face, now permanently marked by the jagged scar, lit up with a brilliant, hopeful smile. He drained his glass in one swallow. "I'd like to ask you on a date." And exactly 1 year later, in that very same cafe, bathed in the soft glow of string lights and the sweet scent of fresh pastries, Harper and Matt exchanged vows, beginning their own beautiful, intertwined story.